topic that is near and dear to my heart. It is Burgundy. Hopefully, you got through the video, the movie. Burgundy's a really, really complex place. Many layers, and I mean, as far as wine appreciation, it ties together so many things. It ties together Western civilization. It ties together geology, geography. It ties together the history of winemaking. It ties together the history and the culture of those who live in Burgundy. So it really it it really reflects why Burgundy is such an amazing place. So if you saw, just for those who may not have seen the movie basically, and hopefully I don't butcher the synopsis too badly, but essentially, there is a wine importer. She's out of she actually sold her company in 2012, so Martine is not part of that anymore, but an import company. She is from Burgundy and is very much involved in the importation of Burgundian wines to the United States. And so she goes to visit Burgundy and visit the wineries that she works with. And this kind of provides the medium to show what happens in an annual cycle in this place. And it tells a story. Again, a very old place. Many people, their parents, their grandparents were winemakers, and so tradition is passed along. I mean, this image behind me is a wine cellar still in use, built in the 12th century. It's been around a while. I'm sort of looking for the ping pong table that got abandoned at some point, but I don't see that. This is what everybody's basement in Burgundy sort of looks like. But anyway, the story it shows you from the perspective of the growers and the winemakers what Burgundy is about. And so in a nutshell, Burgundy is an area that started producing wine. I mean, the earliest evidence of wine was around the 1st century AD. The Romans loved wine, pushed it into wherever there was water, the Romans kind of moved through, and they established a tradition in Burgundy for growing grapes, and furthered that. There was some history of about 400 or 500 years where 200 or 300 years, I apologize, where wine wasn't promoted. The Romans were gone, and the people living in Burgundy at that time were not super sold on wine. And then around the 8th century, the Catholic Church started establishing monasteries and purchasing vineyard land that was given in some cases to the Dukes of Burgundy, the ruling families of Burgundy, but it was all to support the church. And that's a significant thing because it really it codified really winemaking in this area, and it even defined the area. I mean, for example, where the nobility lived further in northern Burgundy. I mean, Burgundy as a wine region is really from Dijon in the north to Lyon in the south. That's about the distance, and the royalty often lived closer to Dijon, and so most of the great Chardonnay and Pinot Noir vineyards are there. They preferred the very best to be closest to them, and that still exists today. The very best still is in those very same regions that that the church set up. The vineyards were often, because the monks were so meticulous about grape growing, the vineyards were well studied, well documented, well recorded, and so they were able to discover kind of the subtle nuances of the differences in this area. And again, they were right. Many of those areas have very definable differences, and those are separated. Now, in the history of Burgundy, kind of the what sort of messed up the works was Napoleon. So during his rule, he decreed that part of the Napoleonic Code said that every heir in a family was entitled to an equal portion of the estate. And so, you know, in where 1800, you had a family that owned an acre. Well, you fast forward a couple hundred years, and that acre has now been divided and subdivided and subdivided and subdivided. And so vineyards today, as a result of Napoleon, vineyards today in Burgundy are broken up into, I mean, in some cases, 100 or more owners of one vineyard, and that gave rise to essentially a concept that is very French, but where you don't make the wine, you broker it. The French, the term is called négociant, and a négociant is going to go to a wine grower and say, hey, I will buy, you own you know, in some cases only a couple vines in a vineyard, so I'll buy that fruit, and I'll work out a deal with your neighbor, and so eventually I'll have enough fruit from that one vineyard to make a wine. And then the winemaker, sometimes it's finished wine, other times it's fruit, but the négociant will then package the wine and sell it. So that's because of the Napoleonic Code making ownership of a vineyard very broken up and divided. The négociants kind of were able to piece it back together. So a lot of wines today are still négociant wines. They're again, sometimes they are buying just finished wine, other times they're actually making it, but there are very few estates where all of the fruit comes from their own owned property. Those typically are the best examples, and because they're the best examples, they can go for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for a single bottle. So this place is unique for its history. It's also unique for its geology, because basically what happened at the same time, millions of years ago, at the same time the Alps were being pushed up, a rather abrupt shift occurred, which created the slope of Burgundy. And what that meant was, and this sort of blows my mind, but if you look at a hill, a sloping hill, the soil on the top of the hill, or rather in the middle of the hill, maybe 50 feet below at the bottom of the hill, the same kind of soil, because it just abruptly, the two plates shifted drastically. And so you have, and then obviously erosion, water and wind comes in. And so the soils in Burgundy are incredibly diverse. I mean, where soils change drastically just in a few feet. So the soil is very complex, and because of the church really studying how grapes grew, they figured out that there were certain areas that did very well with Chardonnay, and then there were certain areas that did very well with Pinot. And there was some areas did a little of both, but they found that in most cases, the soil and the climate and the slope and everything else worked very well for one over the other. So much of this organization that was created, you know, hundreds of years ago still exists, and is part of their tradition. So I think let's start. First thing, why don't you pour a glass of the Pinot Noir, because that may need a little time to open up, to breathe. And we'll talk about kind of why that needs to open up. I guess the last thing to say, and this was sort of conveyed in the movie, but I'll just reiterate it. So Chardonnay is essentially the white grape of Burgundy. There is another grape called Aligoté that is made in small amounts, but Chardonnay is typically the white grape of Burgundy. It did originate in Burgundy. And Pinot Noir is the red grape. Now, there is another one that is called Gamay Noir. It's a variant that is often made in the south of Burgundy, and we'll talk about why it's not part of Burgundy, but in Beaujolais. So Chardonnay and Pinot are the two grapes that we will talk about. The first, 2018, Remoissonnet Père et Fille, so father and son. This is a winery. It's about 150 years old, so it's been around quite a while. They do own a decent amount of property, but again, it's spread out widely. And one of the nice things about Burgundy, well, one of the challenges of Burgundy is that it's kind of a little Forrest Gump box of chocolates. You don't always know what you're going to get because there are so many different parties involved with doing the wine. Lots of opportunities for things to go to alter, and so I very much like producers that have great vineyard properties, because oftentimes, and this is the case, fruit that is not of the quality they're looking for maybe a bottle that might sell for $200 might be fine to be put in a bottle like this one. And this one has that. So some of the fruit for this wine comes from the sub-region of Chablis. And we've talked about this in the past. Wine regions are sort of like Russian nesting dolls. You start out with the largest region, and it shrinks down to, in some cases, it may be a row of grapes in a single vineyard in a sub-region of a sub-region of a sub-region. So Chablis is a sub-region of the larger region of Burgundy. It is the furthest north, and Chardonnay is the dominant grape grown there. There are some others, but Chardonnay rules Chablis. Chablis is this area was also at one time flooded by an ancient sea. And so there are certain parts of Burgundy that are very chalky, and I mean, you can see fossilized seashells in the limestone. And Chablis has a lot of that quality. It is, the wines typically are fairly racy, bright acidity, lots of minerality, and very vibrant wines. So for this wine, they used declassified fruit, so fruit that was not what they were looking for their Chablis labeled wines. And then they also own some property in a sub-region called Pouligny-Montrachet, which wines from that sub-region, it could be hundreds or thousands of dollars. I mean, they can go very well. That's a great Chardonnay region. And so in this bottle, we have both Chablis, so brighter acidity, as well as grapes from from Pouligny-Montrachet, so you have a little more roundness, a little fleshier tone. But this is I was looking for a wine that would really reflect Burgundy. And Burgundy, I guess if there's one thing that at least the French would want you to know, is that Burgundy is all about their concept, the French concept of terroir. And terroir is a hard term to define, but it essentially means a taste of place. And that's not so much I mean, that there are a lot of things that go into that, including tradition and I mean, obviously weather, geography, geology, those types of things matter, but the people making it, the traditions that they use, those are also part of terroir. And so the Burgundians very much want you to have a sense of place with their wine. And I actually, when I tasted this wine, I was really excited because it has on the nose, if you think of a rock, a wet rock, maybe a wet piece of limestone or something, it has that it's almost tactile. You can feel it in the back of your nose. It's that minerality or sea salt. It just has a sense of minerality. And then it has the example of Chardonnay, which Chardonnay flavors of apple and pear, sometimes toasted. The great wines of the Chardonnay of Burgundy often have a little bit of a hazelnut note to it, but just a fresh kind of fall tree fruit profile with minerals and citrus and maybe a little white flower there. But it is, I was excited because this wine really, it's hard to find a wine that truly captures everything that Burgundy is about without spending. I mean, unfortunately, there are a lot of great examples of Burgundy, but they can go into the thousands of dollars. So finding a bottle that reflects Burgundy well at an affordable price is always a treat. And I really liked this wine. It sees a mixture of stainless steel and French oak. So, and some of that is new, but you can kind of smell that warm oak in the background. But yeah, this really has a very nice Burgundian quality. Nice acidity, kind of a creamy texture, mouth coating. I will say I did allow mine to warm up a little more. I had it earlier and it was a little too chilly. I wasn't getting as much as I wanted from it, but let it warm up a little bit, and I'm actually getting a little bit of kind of a toasted nut, maybe toasted almond or something like that in the background. But a really nice wine. Should also have to say, Burgundians are also great chefs. They love to cook. They are farmers, and that's part of an endearing quality about it. I mean, they make some of the most sought after wine on the planet, truly. I mean, certainly they make some of the most expensive collectible wine that shows up at auction. And yet most of them, again, are farmers, and they have dirt underneath their nails, and they're very proud to be kind of simple and connected to the earth. Not, I mean, there's very little pretension, even though one might argue it was justified based on the quality of they produce. There really is very little pretension with most producers. They're simply farmers who have for hundreds of years made wine. And it is it's I thoroughly love this region. It is so you saw this in the movie. When they were harvesting, they were having these really relaxed, elaborate meals. That's true. That is during harvest, you'll drive along these narrow roads that have these high stone walls and a little gate. You peek through the gate, and there are these long picnic tables with vineyard workers and tons of food and wine bottles. Food is very much a component of their culture, and as farmers, a lot of it is fairly farmer food. I mean, the preparation of beef bourguignon. You take a tough piece of meat and you cook it with a whole bunch of really good quality ingredients, and it makes an amazing meal. Coq au vin, you take maybe it's the rooster. Yeah, I mean, you're not taking your best, most tender chicken, and you cook it in wine and a whole bunch of really delicious things, and you end up with this amazing meal. And that's what they do. Everyone has a garden. They raise all sorts of things. They forage for mushrooms. Their farmers market would truly blow anybody's mind. I mean, the farmers market in the town of Beaune is like a you know, a foodie's fantasy world. I mean, they'll have, you know, a good 100 yards of just mushrooms that somebody, you know, people collected that morning. It's pretty impressive. But so food and wine from Burgundy, very well connected. This wine, I mean, with roast chicken, lighter fish. They do eat a lot of fish around here. And lighter proteins, cheeses, but I mean, it's a wine that the acidity carries flavor. It accentuates flavor. It has a lot of things that just start coming out when mixed with food. So definitely explore wines from Burgundy with a meal. It is absolutely worth the experience.
Yep.
Any questions on the Chardonnay?
Do you guys like it? Is it a thumbs up? We were, I was considering talking to Steve and saying, let's go for the cheaper wines from the area, like the $300 bottles, but then
Yeah,
there wouldn't be anybody here. So,
yeah. Well, you know, it's
including me.
funny. They in the movie they visit La Louise Leroy, and Madame Leroy is she's pretty cool. Everybody, I mean, she is a legend, and I every once in a while Leroy wines come into Kansas, and so I had to check. There aren't any available at the moment, but yeah, her entry wine is, I think, is about 125. And it really would be, I mean, I think it's more site specific than simply a Bourgogne Blanc, but not much. It's just her, wherever she is sourcing fruit, she is meticulous about the production of the wine, and really amazing stuff. So if you ever have the option of drinking one of her wines, just do it. Whatever it costs. Just do it. It's it's amazing. Her wines are spectacular. But yeah, unfortunately, I could not wrestle up some Loire for the for our
Thank
taste.
you for that.
Yeah. No, actually, I mean, that's really, I mean, that's one of the unfortunate things about Burgundy. One, there's a lot of wine that's made in that region that, because it is sort of hodgepodge, it isn't very good. And just coming from that region doesn't always guarantee a great product. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to spend more for it, but finding good values in Burgundy does, I mean, that is a task. It is, oftentimes the wines they're fine. There's just nothing Burgundian about them. There's nothing interesting about them. And that's unfortunate. I mean, uh, I definitely would say there are times where, I mean, you definitely don't need to spend thousands of dollars, but, you know, 100-ish would buy a pretty impressive, 80 to $100 would buy a pretty impressive Burgundy to really experience the greatness of Burgundy. But yeah, there are not a lot of values, or not as many values as many would like. I guess
Meanwhile, this wine is pretty darn good that we're having right now.
absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, this really, and give it, you know, if you don't finish it, give it, I mean, give it maybe even a day or two just to see what happens, because it's already, I've had mine open since about noon, and it's already starting to change. I mean, it just takes on different aromas and different flavors. And this producer also, and this is, I would say this is probably more common than not, but much of Burgundy practices organic and or biodynamic farming. So the use of yeast that basically, hundreds and hundreds of years ago made it out into the vineyard and took, made its home there. And so this yeast that exists in their vineyards has taken on the unique qualities of these very old regions. So this producer, not everybody uses native yeast. Some prefer kind of the predictability of inoculating with a pure strain, a lab strain of yeast. But this producer uses native yeast. So whatever comes in on the skin, that's what ferments. And there are chances that can be taken. I mean, certain times you have yeast strains that don't work that well and they show up and maybe the wine isn't that great. On the other hand, when the native yeast does work well, it does impart a very unique characteristic, again, a sense of place, a taste of place, and that's very cool. But yeah, this wine is still changing. I mean, it's getting sort of, I mean, I'm getting more floral notes out of it now, but yeah. For the money, I will say I'm thoroughly impressed with this guy. Now there's also one other thing. This is a 2018, and that is not, I would say, overly common right now. This particular producer, I mean, this particular importer brought in a lot of this, and this is a great example because oftentimes the lesser expensive wines from Burgundy don't really have a promise of longevity. I mean, they're not going to fall off a cliff in 5 years, but they're probably drinking well when they're released. This is an example of a 2018 that it is showing some bottle complexity, but it's not showing oxidative notes and kind of, the color is still bright, that polished gold, that golden straw. I mean, still a very pretty looking wine, beautiful smell, fresh smell. So this is kind of one of those wines that having some bottle age on it has definitely benefited it. And aging Chardonnay is from the better producers. I mean, these wines can go for decades in their peak, and if they're properly stored. So yeah, old Chardonnay. It's funny, I have an interesting relationship with Chardonnay. It's both my most favorite and my least favorite varietal because when it's good, it's spectacular, and when it's bad, it really is just awful. Like just horrible. I mean, it's such an odd thing to love and hate the same thing. But the problem with Chardonnay is it's a traveler. It'll go anywhere people take it. The problem is it doesn't really want to. The problem is it has certain places on the planet where it really loves where it's at. And Burgundy most certainly is one of those places. I mean, I would also argue that the Central Coast in California, and the North Coast, Napa and Sonoma, certainly Oregon, those two are places where the grapes are very happy and the quality shows up in the bottle. I mean, most good winemakers will say that their job is basically just to shepherd, what nature made into a vessel that can be, sent away and enjoyed elsewhere. And so Chardonnay, like I said, it'll go a lot of places. It'll show up, it'll grow, it'll overproduce. But if you baby it and you locate it in a place where it's truly happy, it does make brilliant wine. And like I said, I both love and despise it. But this is definitely a keeper. So let's set that aside and move to the Bourgogne Rouge. And it's interesting, it's funny. Burgundy is one of the few wine regions that is translated. The name is translated into many different languages. And the French sort of don't like it because Burgundy is not a French word. Bourgogne, that's and when I think they even point this out when you look on a bottle, it will say Vin de Bourgogne. I mean, it won't say wines of Burgundy. And so there is a movement sort of, and I've half-heartedly tried to participate, but a movement instituted by the French to return to calling it Bourgogne rather than Burgundy because they don't call it that, and that's probably a fair argument, but it'll take a little while, I guess, to embrace that into parlance, but this is so this next one is from the Mâconnais, and I wish I had a map. It probably wouldn't matter just because Burgundy is such a layered. I mean, there are very, very detailed maps just of single vineyards. So maps are I with Burgundy, you kind of like the more general versions. So the Mâconnais, I guess starting from the top to the bottom, you've got Chablis kind of tucked north and a little bit to the left. Then you have the Côte de Nuits, and then you have Côte de Beaune, and then Chalonnais, Côte Chalonnais, and then Mâconnais. And below that, so below that, it depends what maps you're looking at. Below Mâconnais is a region called Beaujolais. And Beaujolais, they grow Gamay Noir there. And I will actually say, if you're looking for value wine that is of the nature of Burgundy, not all scholars consider Beaujolais to be part of Burgundy. But they are connected. Again, the Dukes of Burgundy did not like Gamay. They didn't think it made as classy a wine as Pinot Noir, so they banned it and they pushed it to the southern end of Burgundy. So it really does reflect that style, that tradition, but purists don't really consider that. So the Mâconnais is in the south. And it's a great locale for good value Burgundy. I mean, true Burgundy. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Many of the wineries are cooperative, so you have many growers bringing their fruit to a single winery where the cooperative's winemaker will fashion that into bottlings. But there's some good values in this region. And this particular one is, I would say, a pretty good example of a Bourgogne Rouge. It took a little while to open up. I wish I'd thought about this, because I always do this. There were certain wines that after I taste earlier in the day, I'm like, ooh, this would be even better if it had a little time on it. So give it a little air, maybe later tonight, go back to it. But this is a great example of kind of a very generalized version of Pinot Noir from Burgundy. And the reason that is the case is that it has the Pinot characteristics. You should smell some almost like cherry pits. There's maybe some red plum. There's some herbal notes. There's some pepper, maybe a little pepper spice. But maybe tucked in the back there's, I don't know, maybe some violet, some purple flower is wafting by. But this is Burgundy is a wine that, I mean, a red Burgundy, Pinot from Burgundy, is a wine that should have a lot of complexity, but it should also have some sense of, and this sounds weird, but earth. It should, like, oftentimes it smells like, it can smell like forest soil, like that really organic, black, rich, crumbly forest soil. Sometimes dried leaves. Sometimes it's more herbal. They do a lot with fermenting entire clusters of grapes with their stems. And so whole cluster fermentation can often develop some herbal kind of stemmy woody notes to it. But bright acidity, nice cherry fruit, spice. I would actually, I'd be curious to see what this bottle does in a couple years, because I think it's got a lot of tannin. You probably noticed it's got some grip to it. Yeah, it's got some grip. So that wine, you know, as it ages, that those tannins will soften a little bit. But again, Burgundy loves food, and so, you know, this wine maybe with some, well, say beef Burgundy, beef Bourguignon, something with some rich fattiness, where that acid and that tannin are going to get softened out by the fats, and the acid is going to kind of refresh the palate, and the tannin is going to cut the fat. Duck is an amazing thing with Pinot. I will say, coming up here, Thanksgiving, Pinot and Chardonnay are wonderful, wonderful food wines for Thanksgiving. Again, they grew up with roasted fowl, and they love those flavor profiles. I mean, for the same reason that you know, turkey likes cranberry sauce. I mean, the fruit in these wines balances the richness of, like, you know, roast duck or roast turkey or roast chicken. But really, really a nice wine. Like I said, little on the drier side. It's I would say this is probably, so where the first wine, they controlled all of their vineyard sources. The second wine was a cooperative. About 100, like I said, I think I read about 100 members of the cooperative. So all those members are going to grow grapes a little bit differently, and they will have different picking crews. So maybe one crew will harvest things that are a little more green, that get tossed into the blend. There is a little bit of a greenness to this, but I think with maybe a little more time that might soften out. But it's got a beautiful nose, very Burgundian nose. You can smell that earth and that cherry and that spice. But yeah, very cool wine. Thoughts on the Pinot?
What do we think? Thumbs up, thumbs down? You're allowed to not like it, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a kind of thumbs across.
Yeah, I would agree with maybe the thumbs across. I mean, it's funny because, like I said, this is a great example of Burgundy, of Pinot from Burgundy. There are a lot more that are like this than there are the ones that just blow your mind.
I will tell you, Steve, I enjoy it, but until I had it with the food that I'm having, makes, like you said, makes a significant difference
Yeah.
about kind of smoothing it out. And I made a stuffed portobello with
Mhm.
chèvre and truffle oil and a blackberry.
Mhm.
And between the blackberry and the cheese and the mushroom, it really kind of levels the wine, the acidity of it. You get more of the earthiness of the wine and less of the bite,
Yeah.
and it's delicious. But you know me, I'm an advocate of drinking and eating simultaneously and as possible all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I mean, I guess I guess, you know, in the region of Burgundy, I mean, certainly they would have wine by itself, but far more often they would have it with food. And I mean, as you saw in the movie, you know, it's almost kind of sad to think that, why can't we have, like, you know, when you've spent hours in the field working, yeah, like stop your day, have a little bump of wine, and chat with your friends, and then go back to your work. And when lunchtime comes, you don't have 15 minutes to throw down, something that you microwaved. It's like, no, it's a 4-course meal that we're gonna have wine, and you're gonna sit down and, chew the fat with your friends. I mean, I just think that, as I was watching the movie, I'm like, that is so civilized. I love it.
And 10
And
o'clock in the morning wasn't too early, and I love that.
no, well, I mean, the thing is, no, it is an interesting proposition, because that is true. One of the challenges that Burgundy has is that they don't have a ready labor force. And so the vast majority of people that are called in to harvest, and in many cases harvest wines that will sell for stratospheric prices, are maybe townspeople who have had a tradition of doing it, but college students, like, and I have 2 college students in my family, and it's like, not certain, like, getting them up in the morning and have them show up to pick grapes. And I mean, I guess they would definitely show up for the food and wine. Yeah, never mind. They would be there. That would work. But no, they're very dependent on keeping their labor force happy. And because without them, they will lose their entire crop. I mean, if they cannot harvest their grapes at the very moment, I mean, it might be the hour that they need to harvest them, that could be the difference of success or failure. And so, I mean, in the movie, you saw they were trying, one of the growers was trying to beat a storm. Well, storms are devastating these days to Burgundy. I mean, if you're just about to harvest and they get a huge rainstorm and there's sitting water, Pinot Noir particularly sucks up water like a sponge. And so the grapes immediately swell with water. Some of them will even crack, which makes them, a problem when they're fermented. So, I mean, it really is. They definitely, I mean, I have to believe they're also taking care of themselves, because they were also out there working, and who wouldn't want a 4-course meal after a day or afternoon in the vineyard, morning in the vineyard. But yeah, no, food and wine in Burgundy, just, I mean, they're lock and key. So I would strongly suggest, testing these things out with, I mean, it can be simple as just, bread and cheese, but they definitely like their food. You can go into the most humble of restaurants in Burgundy and have a meal that blows your mind. It's very, very, very
I'm, I'm,
accessible.
I'm going to a little further bundle and talk about yesterday. Some of our group were out at Davenport, local winery here, been there for a long time having wine. And in no way am I going to compare the wine from Kansas to the wine we saw in the movie. However, the one thing I want to point out about the movie and about what Steve has been saying is the work and the effort and the precision and the decisions and the weather and the time in the vineyard and the picking and getting volunteers and having people do it. And all of that pertains to Blue Jacket and Davenport and Crescent Moon and all the local wineries here and all the ones around the United States and in California. And some, yes, some picked with machines, but all of it is so work intensive. And you can like or dislike the wine. Everybody gets to pick the wines they like. And whether it's Ripple or whether it's Burgundy $1,000 wine isn't as important as appreciating what it took to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other side of this discussion, the movie side of it, that's what I think you should have taken out of the movie as much as the admiration for these wines on that kind of level in terms of how good they are. And to appreciate that. And sometimes this is not the case with these wines, but sometimes uh, uh, a wine from Mendocino is as good, but will not sell for as much as a wine from Napa, just because of the word Mendocino and the word Napa. It's not the price is not related to the wine; it's related to the locale. But regardless, I think we should all appreciate the work. And I hope that's what some of you got out of the movie. That's what I got out of the movie as well. As fact as being envious of the situation. But the work it took, and then you think about the local wineries and the work it takes them to make it. And they're not high profit. They're not making a lot of money, and as expensive as some of the wines in Burgundy are, one bad year can put them under, or 2 bad years in a row, let's say, can put them under. So it's a difficult thing. And anyway, that's my speech. I'm sorry, but
No, I mean that's really one of the, I guess I personally enjoy wines that have more of a story. I mean, there are a lot of things that I think we can enjoy that taste good in the world. But wine is something that, I mean, wine and bread and cheese, those they've been made by humans forever. And there's it's almost kind of like, you may not like these particular wines, but yeah, there is some, you have to kind of tip the hat, given that these same wines, I mean, with these same grapes, have been made for hundreds of years in the same place. And hopefully people many, many moons beyond us will be also drinking this. I mean, I think the odds are likely, given the amount of time that humans have been here. But no, wine should be an experience. It should. There's so many other things you could drink that are kind of devoid of that. And certain wines, yeah, the effort of the farmer, the effort of partnering with nature and succeeding, because I mean there's no guarantee. I mean, that vintage, so in the movie they talk about the 2011 vintage. The 2011 vintage was like, that was Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I mean, the this is, I looked this up. 2011 was the first time, let's see, 2011, 2017, there was one other that had that where harvest began at the beginning of August. Normally harvest would begin maybe a month later. And as I said earlier, they've been keeping detailed records on everything about these vineyards for hundreds of years. And 2011, 2017, and there was one other, might have been 2019, were 3 vintages in the same century where it had only been like 1 or 2 vintages in the previous 2 centuries. So this change is fairly dramatic for an area that has been fairly consistent. But yeah, harvest in August. I've got some Pinot Noir from 2011 that I've not had, so I don't know what it's gonna be like. But I'm kind of intrigued to see how it's aging and if it's even still around. Because it was a really, really challenging year. Lots of things going wrong. I mean, hail. These skins are wafer thin, so a hailstone will devour it. Mold, if it rains and it doesn't dry out and the vineyard gets infected with mold, and bunch rot, the fruit just stays in the vineyard and the birds eat it. I mean, so when everything works out, and that is actually one of the things about Pinot in general. Pinot is a wine that probably has its odds against it, being spectacular, but when it works out, it is truly amazing. It's mind blowing. But yeah, I would say this is a pretty good example. I wish there were a little riper fruit on it. Maybe a little more richness to round out the tannin. But the earth component, the spice component, the fruit, that is really classic Burgundy. And I would agree with Jack. Probably having some food with it would definitely bring the tannic edge down a little bit.
Let me also come back a little bit since we have a few more minutes and get back to the movie part of this. We normally scale the movie on a scale of 1 to 5 with show of hands. So let's do that, and then we can talk about that for a second. But what did you think of the movie in terms of how good it was, 1 to 5? So 4s and 5s, it looks like. Pretty much. Yeah. I thought it was a really well done movie myself. And I've seen it now 3 times, and I always catch something I miss. So hang on a minute. There's another message. Oh, a few people haven't got to see it yet, but the it's really a worthwhile in and of itself. It's a worthwhile movie, I think. Just the struggle and the fact that they take it through an entire year, and you're talking about, the kind of wines. Plus the scenery is magnificent. So
Yeah,
I
the movie definitely captured a true sense
yeah.
of what Burgundy looks
If
like.
anybody wants to comment, or if you want to unmute yourself and have anything to say about either the movie or tonight's wines, we can certainly do that if you want to do that. No problem with an unmuted conversation here. So my feeling was everybody really liked the white and kind of liked the red. Is that the general consensus kind of, or I'm seeing nods of yes. I think the red is a little, I think there was a lot of tannin and a lot of acidity in it. It was hard. The heavy encrusted bottles. Oh, okay. One of the questions from the Behringers, those heavily encrusted bottles in the cellar, are those drinkable?
Yes.
And
Mhm.
not only they were drinking from
Yes.
in the movie,
Yes.
they were pouring them.
Those are drinkable. They want that kind of left there. I don't know exactly the physics and science involved, but that bottle encased in mold and funk actually does help protect it.
Yeah.
So they will leave that. In fact, they also it also is not it's very much frowned upon if you're ever touring a wine cellar in Burgundy particularly, and you see a spider, just let it be, because killing a spiders eat mold, and the spiders are welcome in the vineyard. So they don't like those to be killed. But no, those bottles are perfectly drinkable from the better vintage. I mean, that's the amazing thing. I mean, from the better vintages and the best producers, these wines can literally last. I mean, there's wines from the previous century. I mean, the 1800s that are still drinkable. I mean, wines, Burgundy from the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, still definitely drinkable. So it is.
There's a couple questions, Steve. Let's kind of grab these before it's a little
Absolutely.
late. What happened during the German occupation of France to the vineyards?
Um, Actually, I don't know.
My
There,
guess is they protected them because they love French wine,
right.
but
No, they
but I don't
pilfered.
know.
No, I don't know specifically with um with Burgundy. Bordeaux, I know they had issues. I mean, the French resistance actually in Bordeaux, um they sheltered in Bordeaux in some of the cellars. But I don't know for Burgundy. I mean, certainly there are areas where, if they were being invaded, I mean, I know there, for example, there's a very famous Italian producer that they knew that they were about to be invaded, and so they sent their staff out into the mountains, and they buried it, and they ended up losing it. And the Bertani is the in Verona is the producer, and they found it maybe 20 years ago rather. They found the stash that had been buried. So I would imagine they probably tried to steal it away so that it wouldn't be taken.
Janet had a question, which I'm not sure I understand. So Janet, would you unmute and ask your question so I know what you're.
So I thought I heard we only got about 30 minutes into the movie. We're gonna try to finish it if you have time after this. But didn't they keep saying the Cisternic monks? Isn't that what they kept calling in that area? Cisternic monks. So I was just hearing that, and so I was wondering if that's where cisterns came from. But
yeah,
I can Google it later. But I just wondered.
Maybe sister
went right over my head. I don't
know. No, yeah, I can't remember the specific order.
Okay.
But I mean, to this day, there is a hospital that in the town of Beaune, a medieval hospital, and it became an area where, I mean, it was almost like a retirement home, and there are still people. I mean, it's very much a museum, but there's still people who live there. And every year there is a big auction for Hospice de Beaune, where the church and large wine producers, because the church still does own some property, will donate large lots of wine to help pay for the maintenance of this medieval retirement home. But yeah, the monks, I mean, that really is credited. It was them being so meticulous with everything. I mean, documenting just the subtle changes of one vine to another, and then finding these little honey holes and walling them off, and the walls are still there. So the monks definitely, the church and the cloistered monks definitely did some major work for creating Burgundy as it is today.
All right. Are there any other questions for Steve or comments about the movies? Because I think we've hit and surpassed our 6 o'clock time. I want to respect everybody's time tonight. So not hearing any, I'm going to move on to have dinner and drink more of my wine
And dessert.
and have my dessert from the French pastries. And I'm going to wish you all a good evening, and we'll see you at the next either dessert in a movie or wine around the world, whichever comes first, or whatever event we see you at. I will remind you, we do have a special dessert in a movie this month, I think on the 18th, if I remember correctly, which is a discussion of the movie and a conversation about universal income, and it will feature Sam Altman. So, who, for those of you who haven't figured it out yet, is not my son. He is my nephew, however. And he is a subject very important to him. So we will be discussing that. We will not be discussing AI. So please join us for that. And if not, have a wonderful evening. Enjoy your food. Enjoy your wine.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Steve and Jack.
Bye.
For hosting.
Thank you. Be well.